Welcome, everyone, to the performance reading, Women of the Diaspora. We have a few housekeeping items. This is our territorial land acknowledgement. As is our practice in British Columbia, we begin by acknowledging the traditional territories where we live and work. I would like to acknowledge that we are situated on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places near and far, and to acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. The Bridges Festival heralds the return of spring and a time of rebirth. For the past 3 years, we have joined 55 Irish diplomatic missions and many other community groups from Washington to Moscow, or to honor Ireland's matriarchal saint. We welcome participants from around the world to celebrate the creativity of women. Just a few housekeeping notes. Please note that this session will be recorded and shared in coming days. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. These will be answered at the end. Bridget Festival Vancouver is a volunteer-led event, and admission to all events is free. Donations to the Irish Benevolent Society are appreciated, and information on how to donate can be found on our website. And now I would like to introduce Una Berry. Thank you.
The words collide, Eileen Cullinan. The scribe objects, you can't put it like that. I can't write that. But the client is a tough, small woman, 40 years old. She insists she needs her letter to open out, full of pleated, revolving silk and the soft lobes of her ears, where she flaunts those thin silver wires. She wants to tell her dream to the only one who will get the drift. How she saw their children lying, everyone dressed out in their simplest fears. They glowed, the shape of their sentence outlined in sea green. Among those beloved exiles, one sighed happy as a curtain lightened and the grammar changed, and the wall showed pure white in the shape of a bird's wing. But when she whispered it to the scribe, he frowned, and she saw she had got it wrong. She had come to a place where they all spoke the one language. It rose up before her like a quay wall draped in sable weeds. He said, "You can't put those words into your letter. It will weigh too heavy. It will cost too much. It will break the strap of the postman's bag. It will crack his collarbone. The bridges are all so bad now. With that weight to shift, he's bound to stumble. He'll never make it alive." Thank you. And now I would like to introduce our first reader, Dara Culhane. Dara, over to you.
Thank you, Una. Hello, my name is Dara Culhane, and I grew up in Ireland and in Montreal. My father's name was Gary Culhane, and he was born in Dublin in 1912, and he grew up in Montreal. His mother, her name was Margaret, and in my grandmother's family there were 4 sisters. Each of them was deeply involved in the politics of their day. Hannah Sheehy Skeffington was the eldest, and she's described as a Republican, a socialist, and a feminist. My grandmother Margaret was an actress and an elocutionist. In 1901, Margaret directed and co-starred with James Joyce in the only play he ever performed in public. Cupid's confidant. Joyce would later say that the memory of this performance, quote, made the cheeks of me virgin arse blush, unquote. Joyce's biographer, Richard Ellman, wrote that it was Margaret Sheehy to whom Joyce was most attached. So that was Margaret's relatively slim claim to fame. My grandmother was left a widow with 4 children in 1916. Her husband, Francis Culhane, a lawyer, died of a heart attack. In 1922, she fell in love with her young godson, Michael Casey. When she found herself pregnant at 42, Margaret was not banished to a convent. Rather, coming from what we might call an elite family of the time, Margaret and Michael were quickly married in a small ceremony in Dublin and shipped across the North Atlantic Ocean in February to Montreal. That was how my father was sent to his mother and stepfather when he was 10 years old. The Irish diaspora is a place where complicated stories are told and sometimes not told. Margaret wrote to her sister, Hannah, in February 1928. Dearest old girl, Gary turned 16 today. He's an odd fellow. He won't study and he won't work at anything he does not like. But he has a passionate love for Ireland. He'll read anything, even the driest mythological text, if it's about Ireland. Gary says he'll go back there to live when he's a man. I fear my son has been cursed with the exile's dream. Letters to and from Ireland were often read, performed really, around the dinner table. Like this one. May 1938. Gary Culhane in Montreal writing to his Aunt Hannah in Dublin. Dear family, I'm writing this while Mother is playing bridge. I hear her going on in a very dramatic and highly impressive strain. The Irish nation has suddenly been raised on a par with the States financially. It seems that Ireland is far ahead of Wales and England in go-ahead business methods, in speed, and in transportation and commerce. Ireland is a land of saints and scholars and better businessmen, better policemen, better tram men, and the most beautiful women. Michael Casey died accidentally in 1938. Margaret wrote to her sister Hannah, My dearest old girl, I know you want to hear all the tragic details of my beloved's passing. It seems to me he was my life, and I had no life outside him. And that's the end. His first little volume of poetry will be out this month. They're saying he made the soul of Canada vocal, as only an Irishman could. Love from your heartbroken sister. Margaret returned to Ireland when Michael Casey died, and she lived there until 1956, when she passed away in Dublin. In 1957, at the tender age of 45, my father packed up our family, my mother, my sister, and I, in Montreal, and returned to the place he had always called home, Ireland. I was 6 years old, and my sister Roisin was 11. True, tens of thousands of people were emigrating from Ireland to Canada in the 1950s, but my father was never one to swim with the tide. A family trait that he didn't, as he said, lick off a stone. My parents separated in 1960, and I left Ireland and returned to Montreal with my mother. My sister Roisin stayed in Ireland with my father. From the age of 10, my relationship with my father was carried out entirely through the mail. December 1961. Dearest Dara, it is your birthday. You are 11 years old already. Did you receive the MacLeamore records I sent you? Listen to these recordings. Let your ear become accustomed to the cadences. Get the flavor of the voices, the intonation, the rhythm, the sense of style. Learn these pieces and then listen to yourself. Don't imitate. Nowhere in North America can you get the quality that is in those voices. We Irish shine best at the spoken and poetic word. April 1967. At last, I have news that may truly make you proud of your old da. The Saturday before Easter Sunday, I was in the Shelbourne Hotel at the bar, and next to me was a handsome young man wearing a loud but very tasteful tweed check suit and a scarf around his neck. Then the Sunday papers reported that two Beatles were indeed here in Dublin. So it is true, your father sat next to a Beatle. In lieu of his autograph, I append my own at the end of this letter. Love, Gary Culhane, B.S.R. Beatle Shoulder Rubber. October 1969. Dearest darling Dumpling Dara, on the way home from Roscrea yesterday, I stopped at the old Sheehy house and wonderful old watermill in Lochmore in County Tipperary. Beside it is a little house that was built in 1840 for the Sheehys. It's a very beautiful spot with a small river winding by. I wish I had found it earlier. You would have loved it. It is so beautiful and gracious and peaceful and dignified. Perhaps someday we will see it together. Lots and lots of love and a big hug and a kiss from da old fella. We didn't see it together. The last time I saw my father was in 1992. He was 80, I was 42. My cousin Peter called to say that my father had been admitted to a nursing home. They found your father alone in his house, Peter said. Starving himself, they say. They say old people with dementia often do that. He says he's on hunger strike. The doctors confined him to Hampstead Home. He hates it there. He's forever going on at the nurses to break him out. He's after sharpening a spoon that he uses to jump the locks, and then they have to go looking for him. But what else can they do? He's got no children here to take him home, does he? My sister Roisin and I and our two daughters fly to Dublin and go straight from the airport to Hampstead Home. We're Gary Culhane's daughters, we tell the receptionist. She directs us down the hall. A nurse pushes an old man who's hunched over in a wheelchair into the visiting room. He's thin, gaunt, frail. His fair skin has turned translucent. Bright red and blue veins spider across his cheekbones, and his blue eyes are watery and bloodshot. They are looking nowhere, at nothing. My sister wheels our father out into the garden. He drifts in and out of times and places. One minute he recognizes us. He calls us by our names. He asks after our children. The next minute he calls us by his sisters' names, his aunts, his mothers. Now he's a child playing with his brother on the strand in Bundoran. Then he's crying. Now it's 1935, and he's making a speech about the Bolshevik Revolution to the Garment Workers' Union in Montreal. Then he's digging into his shoe. He pulls out the sharpened spoon he's hidden. Now he's off ranting about the Pope. The man's an arsehole, an asshole. Then it's 1948, and he's salmon fishing in British Columbia. Now it's 1916. He's 4 years old. He's looking at his father's corpse laid out in the living room of the Culhane family's house in Dublin. Then it's 1980. He's opening the door of his shop on Grafton Street. There's been a burglary. Now he grins lewdly and points to his lap, says something about his willy. Then it's 1950. He's in Vancouver. He's directing Sholem Aleicham's It's Hard to Be a Jew. Now He tells me I shouldn't wear brown. It drains my color. I have dark hair and fair skin. I should wear red and deep colors. And he stops mid-sentence, grabs my arm. I failed you, he says. Don't ever forgive me. Don't forgive the unforgivable. It will do you no good to forgive me, so don't. I want to say something, but he's gone again. It's 1960, it's Vancouver, it's Dublin, it's 1920, it's Montreal, it's 1940, it's Kinsale, it's Vancouver, it's Cork, it's... My father didn't come back to the world again after Roisin's and my visit. His body lived on a while, but he recognized no one, spoke hardly at all, and appeared unmoved, even when nurses took him out to the garden. His heart stopped beating in 1996. I remember that when I was a child, my father told me that the moon is where lunatics go when they die. They make all their own rules, they play all day, and they don't have bedtimes. Often now, on the full moon, I look at the sky and I imagine my father and I gallivanting about from cloud to cloud in the madly beautiful Irish skies. I laugh, I cry, I laugh again. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce you to our next reader, Sharon Brown. Sharon.
Thank you, Dara. In honor of the pagan, Bridget, my piece today will be about Sheila na gigs. Sheilas are figurative stone carvings of naked females displaying their vulvas and were found on churches and castles throughout Ireland during the medieval period. The mystery of the function and purpose of Sheila na gigs remains an enigma, even today. Some of the most prominent theories range from birthing to warding off evil. Some view them as ancient goddesses, some as vestiges of a pagan cult. Whatever their exact meaning, they are certainly one of the most powerful, profound, and fascinating sacred objects in the history of humankind. In a letter between myself and a close friend, I recounted parts of a 2007 trip to Ireland that I took with one of my sisters. I wanted to hear her rumination on these fascinating Irish female carvings. The following is an excerpt. August 31, 2021. Dear Roisin, I don't know if you've ever seen the homepage of the Sheila na gig Project website. Under the heading, What are Sheila na gigs? John Harding describes them as, quote, quasi-erotic stone carvings of a female figure, which took me by surprise, as I have never seen them in the light of eroticism in any sense of the word. In fact, in the two books I've read on them, they are described as female deities. In one of those books, there is a very revealing anecdote about an American visitor in 1990 visiting the National Museum of Dublin and requesting to see some of the Sheila examples stored in the crypts there. The museum's reply was, Sheila na gigs are ugly and unflattering to women, with the suggestion that the public should focus on Cistercian abbeys instead. And this is an intriguing comment when you consider how many Sheilas have been found in Cistercian foundations. Hugs, Sharon. Extract from my friend's reply, October 3, 2021. Hi, Sharon. My dad always claimed that the Sheilas were amulets worn by warriors going into battle, their purpose being to scare off the enemy. I have no idea what my dad's sources were or how accurate, but his stories were the greatest. Also, given that Celtic women warriors went into battle naked, painted blue, and screeching, it's not a stretch to see the strategy of using women to frighten off foes. So, thinking about the different theories, childbirth, I would discount this theory having trained as a home birth midwife. The position of the Sheila holding her vulva open is not a birthing position, nor is there a baby's head visible inside the vagina. They were older, not fertile women. I do not see them in any way as erotic. Jesus Christ, put it back in your pants. Much love, Roisin. When my sister found a brochure in the gift shop of the Skibbereen Heritage Famine Center in County Cork, we began a feminine odyssey to locate as many Sheila Nagigs as we possibly could. Our journey proved to be more arduous and exciting than we had ever imagined. We did locate several of them in situ, but it has always been the red Sheila that has haunted me for years. What bothers me the most is that my sister and I never ended up seeing it, despite 2 attempts we made during our 2007 trip to Ireland. At this point in my story, I would like to relate this unsettling experience. One day, we were traveling through County Sligo, looking for a town called Castle Baldwin. When we arrived, we asked a young local man for assistance, and he directed us to his publican father, who in typical Irish fashion gave us elaborate directions to our destination of Behy Castle, along with gruffly asking, "What do you want to see that for?" Only 2 walls of the castle remain standing, and these remains are situated on private farmland. The unusual Sheila, unusual because it is painted red, had been re-erected on a wall inside one of the outhouses. As we traveled down the road, searching for the remains of the castle, we finally spotted it sitting eerily in the middle of some farm fields. We backed up, looking for a road that would lead us to Behy Castle. Unfortunately for us, we failed to notice a house situated close to the main road, but partially hidden from our view by trees. We merrily went up the dirt road to be met by crumbling, dilapidated farm buildings, seemingly neglected. Some of the buildings were jammed with wood parts and junk materials. The sheep grazing in the field looked worse for wear. A tiny kitten whose eyes were crusted and nearly closed came scampering over to greet us. I don't know where we got the courage to get out of the car, because suddenly both my sister and I became uneasy about the creepiness of the place. We called out to see if anyone was about, but there was no response. Despite our misgivings, we began to look for the Sheila. After a little while of searching with no luck, I ended up going around behind the farm buildings to get a closer look at the remains of the castle. Because the boggy land was too wet for me, I was back there no more than 10 minutes to take a couple of photos. When I came back around, my sister had worked herself into a lather. She had been calling my name at the top of her lungs for almost the whole time I was behind the buildings, and I never heard a sound. It was hard to understand because by the way we were situated, I was only 20 or 30 feet from her the whole time. Naturally, we were completely spooked at this point and more or less went tearing out of there and back down the road. As we approached the end of it, I can only describe what I saw as some kind of a creature partially blocking our way. A toothless man, about 80 years of age, dressed in typical farm clothes that had seen better days, froze us in our tracks. His palpable rage could be felt as it penetrated even the confines of our rental car. We had trespassed on his property and we were in trouble. I was all for gunning it out of there, but my sister insisted on slowing and rolling the window down. but fear gripped her so severely that she couldn't speak. I have never seen my sister speechless in my life. So, with whatever Irish ethnicity I possess, I launched into an elaborate spiel about being a visiting anthropologist looking for the rare red Sheila na gig. Instantly, his anger subsided. Whether it was due to my accent or the stupidity of my response, he took mercy on us and only chastised us lightly in his croaking, high-pitched voice. In fact, he insisted we return to the site and gave precise instructions on where the Sheila was located. I'll never understand why we went back, but we did. Again, our flesh crept as we approached the outhouse which contained the Sheila. It had a large stick wedged against the door, with an open padlock dangling from it. As we both stared at the closed door, my sister casually said, "Okay, open it." To which I responded, "You open it." She replied, "But I'm holding all my camera equipment." To which I replied, "I'll hold your bloody equipment for you." We didn't argue. We turned on our heels and left, hoping the whole time we wouldn't run into that odd man at the end of the road. Luckily, we didn't. A few months ago, I wrote to my sister reminding her of our trip and the emotions it evoked in us throughout our stay in Ireland. These are excerpts of our letters. August 31, 2021. Dear sister, remember our wonderful 2007 trip to Ireland? It began in the town of Skibbereen. Our focus shifted so rapidly from the famine to the Sheilas, and our fascinating adventure began. As we started our journey in Kilsarkin, County Kerry, at the cemetery, then across the country and all the way through to our final attempt for the elusive red Sheila at Behy Castle, County Sligo. Love, Sharon. Extract from my sister's response, October 4, 2021. So much of my concentration was on the road, and as you reminded me several times, stay to the left, as we quickly drove down narrow, precarious, often rutted country roads to get to the next Sheila. But the most striking aspect of that hunt was the feeling that our mother was with us the whole time, guiding us in some intangible way, yet very present. Each discovery was unique within itself and a treasured moment when a Sheila na gig would reveal itself. And by far, the most memorable was the one that got away, the red Sheila, who we searched for until we found the door that neither of us dared to open. Sick kittens, an odd combination of clothing hanging on a clothesline outside, and a general sense of unease, like we were being watched, were strong forces that pushed me to want to leave without knowing why. I felt as if a moving, flowing vortex was following us at that site, waiting to swallow us up. Love, Sis. After our trip, I wondered about how strange it was that we both underwent at the very same moment a seemingly unrealistic fear of opening a door containing a rare figurative carving. It now seems absurd, but at the time, it was a very powerful and sinister feeling that overcame both of us. Was it a coincidence that our mother died 3 weeks after we returned from our remarkable journey? Or was there something more guiding us through this incredible quest? Somehow, our mother spirit, our exposure and awareness of these captivating female deities blended together to bring us through this extraordinary episode in our lives. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce you to Una Berry. Over to you, Una.
Thank you, Sharon. As I'm going to be reading Girl Angst, Memories of School Days. Throughout my school years, Bernadette was the most popular girl in the class. She was a favorite pupil with the nuns and sat at the front of the classroom, surrounded by her close friends, Deirdre, Joan, Nuala, and Patricia. She was pretty. Flawless skin, dark blue eyes, dark hair, and always wore the correct uniform. She was on the field hockey team as well as the netball team. She excelled at gym and each year was awarded medals during the annual display. She played the piano. She was good at acting, getting the best parts in school plays. She had a perfect family and lived in a beautiful, well-kept home. Her older brother and sister obviously adored her. Her father was a handsome army officer, her mother very pretty and friendly to me when I was invited to tea. She was always interested in what I had to say. Bernadette's father knew my father, so even at that early age, I knew the invitations were given because they felt sorry for me. I doubt whether Bernadette would have noticed me otherwise. In my eyes, she was a paragon of virtue and beauty. Altogether, a girl to be envied, and envy her I did. When I was 10, I asked my parents if they would call me by my middle name, Bernadette, somehow thinking that if I changed my name, my life would become like hers. I was not the most popular girl in the class. I was not liked by many of the teachers. I was thought to be clever, but far too outspoken, a rebel. I did not get to sit at the front of the class. I wasn't considered pretty, and although a good actor, was never given the important parts such as the princess or the handsome prince, but had to make do with more unsavory roles such as the witch or the evil elf. I longed to be part of her clique, but never was. Nevertheless, I did get invited along with her close friends to her birthday and Christmas parties. I loved the thought of going, but it was very stressful too. I was considered the outsider and only tolerated because her parents had invited me. Aside from feeling self-conscious about my unattractive homemade party clothes, I didn't play the piano. Every girl invited was expected to play a piece, so I pretended I played. Probably everybody knew I was making up the tune as I went along, but never said anything to me. I had to be on constant guard around questions about my home life, especially when I was invited to tea on my own. I recall the time when her mother told me I could have butter as well as jam on my slice of bread. Even as a young girl, I remember feeling humiliated, as at home, we could only have butter or jam. I thought that was the norm. When I turned 10, I wanted to have a birthday party. I was afraid my father would get drunk, so asked my grandparents if I could have it at their house. They agreed, and I invited Bernadette and all her friends. Any excuse to be included in their lives. It backfired big time, as not only did my grandfather chase the girls around the house, pretending to be a big bad wolf, he also made ham sandwiches with thick, hot mustard spread on them, making them inedible. Fortunately, the cake my grandmother baked was good. For weeks after, I was the laughing stock of the class. However, that did not stop me from trying to get Bernadette to be my friend. Not just a casual friend, but my bosom friend. My grandparents occasionally would allow me to bring a friend to their home for tea. I rarely invited anyone else but Bernadette. After tea, Grandad, who was the assistant harbour master in Dunleary, would take us to the mailboat before it set sail for Holyhead. We would be taken up to the bridge or down to the engine room. It was exciting and different and always seemed to please Bernadette. They were the times that I was most happy. One day, when home life was becoming even more chaotic, she and her parents suddenly arrived at our home and asked me to go for a walk with them. I was shocked when I opened the front door and found them standing there. I wanted to run away and hide, anything rather than let them see where I lived. I couldn't even say hello. Fortunately, I had learned to act, think, and lie quickly. So I mumbled a quick, "Mammy is out, but I'll get my hat and coat." I quickly closed the door in their faces. I did go for that walk, but was miserable most of the time. I had never told anyone at school where I lived. I was so deeply ashamed. In the school holidays, I would sometimes see her at the open baths in Bray. She would say hello and go back to sunbathing. She continued to look beautiful, and boys gathered around her like bees to honey. After I left school, I never set eyes on her again. However, she has remained in my subconscious over the years. In 2006, I attended a school reunion, hoping to see her, but she didn't show up. Deirdre, still her friend, told me Bernadette wasn't up to it. A few years later, I learned she had died of breast cancer. I was deeply saddened and disappointed at not seeing her again, as she was one of the main reasons I attended the class reunion. Would I have confessed my envy to her? I don't know, but I would have expressed my gratitude for the loving attention her parents bestowed on me. Not only for the tea invitations, painful as they were, but for the times they came to school plays and made a point of signaling me out for praise. My father told me years later that her father berated him for never seeing me on stage. It wasn't until Esther came to the school that I finally had a partner in crime. She was 12 when she arrived, having spent her early life in England. Her father was a GP, and as he was the nuns' doctor, she was treated with a certain amount of respect. She was feisty, opinionated, and brilliant, questioning everything the nuns said. She must have been the bane of their lives. I was a pussycat compared to her. We sat together in class and walked home together, plotting, planning, and dreaming. We started a school newspaper that was quickly confiscated by Sister Sebastian. At that time, very little credit was given for creative endeavors considered by the nuns as outside the box, and everything that Esther and I got up to was way outside that box. School newspapers were definitely a no-no. My friendship with Esther was short-lived, as I moved schools a year later and never returned to Loreto. Nevertheless, I always remember how important she was to me at a time when my self-confidence was at a very low ebb. A few years ago, I got back in touch with her, and for a while we met and renewed a tentative friendship. And this is a poem I wrote about that friendship when I finally got back in touch with her. Old friend. I try to imagine after 45 years what you'd look like. I remember you thin and gangly with blue eyes and short brown hair. Mm-hmm. In class, arms folded, you asked questions, disputed answers, rocking back and forth on the chair as Sister Sebastian struggled to keep her temper. I was not surprised you ended up a math teacher in a girls' school. I was surprised you had married the only girl who didn't talk about boys. Walking home together, we'd planned to write the great Irish novel or publish a school newspaper. When we finally met at Bray Station, you looked smaller than I remembered. Turning to me, you grinned and said, "Ah, there you are, Una. I'm parked at the front," as if you had seen me yesterday. You packed me into your small purple car and took off, hurtling around corners, up narrow lanes, until we reached your home, wedged in a corner of the Wicklow Mountains. You introduced me to your beloved horse, 4 dogs, 2 cats, and a husband. All weekend, we walked in the hills, reminiscing about school days, families, filling in the gaps of our separate lives. When you asked Frank what he thought of me, he said, "I was just like you." Our last day together, we got lost in the mountains. You asked if I had a compass. We were tired and snappy with each other. I remember thinking that dying of exposure would be less painful than having to endure your company 1 minute longer. Eventually, you found the track that led back down to the road. Over dinner in Enniskerry, we recovered our humor, ending the day with a promise to stay in touch. A few years have passed since our reunion. On my annual visits, we go for walks, meet for dinner. Your letters and cards continue to arrive, some brusque, some newsy and affectionate. An uneasy friendship persists. Thank you. And now over to you, Moira.
Thank you, Una. Hello, my name is Maura de Freitas. Some of you might know me as Maura McKay when I launched the Celtic Connection with my mother in 1991. We retired the paper after almost 30 years in 2020. At the first St. Bridget's Festival of Vancouver held in 2020 at Simon Fraser University Harbour Centre, I read a very dramatic and heartfelt letter that I wrote to my father from New York City in 1993. I wrote it in the middle of a massive blizzard, which was billed the storm of the century. At that time, my father had recently left Canada to return to his childhood home in Strabane, County Tyrone. He left this country angry and disillusioned, and I was reaching out in yet another attempt to reconcile. His response opened the door that allowed me to spend considerable time with him in the north of Ireland and to learn much more about a father who I came to realize, much to my surprise, had a life of his own before I arrived on this planet. Imagine that. My father had 14 siblings, so you can imagine how big and diverse the family has become. We're talking hundreds now. So here's some of that correspondence. May 25, 1994, Strabane, County Tyrone. Dear Maura, I hope you have received my letter, for it has been across the ocean now almost as many times as you. I want you to call Pat, my brother, to see if the bank has sent me a new card, for the one I have will not work, and I can get no money out of the machine, and I'm nearly broke. The weather is good here for a change, and Donegal has never looked better. Margaret has moved in with James Casey, and there is conflict with Donna and James over the dog, as Donna doesn't like her. Little background here on some of the characters. Donna and Margaret are my first cousins. Margaret had been living in Australia, but returned for a time with her daughter Anne. James is my uncle, who was married to my Aunt Bridget, my father's sister. Back to the letter. Donna would throw the dog in the river if she had her way, for James lets her lick the plates and drink tea out of his cup, and that doesn't go down too good. James went down the street on Saturday and got drunk and had to be carried into the house. Donna said she would let him lie outside. I went up on Sunday to see him, and he told me he was dying. I went up on Monday, and he was away over to Clady to cut Helen's grass. When you get here, give me lots of time, and I will have to reserve the guest room for you. It will better suit you, as it has its own bathroom and it's warm. I'm sure you know all about a cold room over at Casey's. I hope Pat can get his trouble straightened out, for he is far too soft with those idiots he has working for him. But he wouldn't listen to me. I will draw a line now, for it is dinner time. All for now, Dad. July 26, 1994. Dear Maura, just a short note to let you know I am well, or nearly well anyway. Nothing new here except the odd bombing, but people pay no attention as they just walk around the debris and carry on as if it wasn't there. Martin, another cousin, was in jail since last September and just got out last week on bail. His cousin, known as Bino, on the other side of the family, who was a police informer, forced him to store a rocket launcher and then told the police where it was. So Bino isn't too popular around here right now. I sent the papers to Pat, and he was supposed to give them to you, but you know Pat. Also, see if you can phone the pension people for me, for I've been trying to get it sent to me direct, and I've written to them half a dozen times, and I get nowhere. It's not too hot here right now, and it isn't raining, so that is something. I have an old car, and I take it across the border whenever I feel like it, as there are lots of places to go in Donegal. I haven't got a phone yet, as it costs £175 to get one installed, and I don't know if I will need it that bad. But maybe I'll change my mind once I get my money situation straightened out. Johnny's son, Kevin, another cousin, got his master's degree from Trinity and hopes to get a job teaching. He was in jail for 5 years and spent his time studying, so it wasn't all wasted time. Better yet, it was paid for by the British taxpayer. Martin got his job back as he wasn't convicted of any crime, and he doesn't think he will have to stand trial. His lawyer is demanding Bino, the informer's file, and the police will not turn it over. So that's how it stands right now. That's all for now. I hope you get the paper on its feet. Love, Dad. My father died in Strabane on the 20th of June, 1995. My uncle Johnny's son Kevin came out to visit shortly thereafter on his first and only visit to Canada. He loved it here, and this is a letter he wrote shortly after his return. September 1995, Omagh, County Tyrone. Dear Maura, doesn't time fly? I've been meaning to write to you, and I just realized that I am back from Canada almost a month and a half, and I haven't written to you. Well, the jet lag did get to me on the way home. I was really mixed up for a few days after I returned. It was really weird. I was also very depressed for a few weeks. I guess it was great to get away, see new places, meet new people, experience new things, and forget about all the crap for a few weeks. Unfortunately, it was all waiting there as soon as I got off the plane. I'm okay now, and I've got back into the swing of things. Pat phoned a few weeks ago. He was trying to get a hold of my father to arrange the funeral bill. I think it is all sorted out now. I was out at the grave at the weekend, and it is being kept tidy as there is always flowers on it. But I can't say who does that. Maybe Vera, maybe Phyllis or Molly. Anyway, it is not being neglected. How are you doing with the paper? Has your mother and Tom sorted out the new house yet? Tell them both, I was asking, and I'll never be able to repay you all for the kindness and generosity. I got my photos developed, and they turned out very well. My sister Margaret, who, as you know, is also a teacher, is doing very well and has been working since the start of the term. Her young daughter Anne also seems quite happy, and she has made many new friends and going to discos, but she still won't admit that she likes Ireland now. I'll be very sorry to see them go back to Australia after Christmas. My father will break his heart. I'm sure you can understand that feeling that maybe you won't see each other again. So it will be a sad farewell all around. The political situation at the moment still appears very bogged down. The British are still procrastinating, and the Unionists are still saying no. Big surprise there. Jerry Adams is saying that Bill Clinton's visit in November will hopefully move things along. I hope so. If nothing else, the visit will liven up the news over here. There's a big row in Belfast about asking Bill Clinton to turn on the Christmas lights. The Unionists want the Power Rangers to do the honors because Clinton is perceived to be biased in favor of the Republicans. I must wrap up now, Maura. I miss the late night coffees and the good conversation. Yours faithfully, Kevin. Dear listeners, you might be wondering, who are these Power Rangers that Kevin refers to in his letter? I wondered the same thing until I realized he's talking about children's action heroes. According to a 1995 report in the Irish News, the 6 mighty martial arts experts were scheduled to be in Belfast in a touring stage version of the television show. A local television news station held a telephone poll on the matter, and the Power Rangers destroyed the leader of the free world. 65% of listeners voted for them, while the under 10 crowd was even more strongly in favor of the Rangers. In the end, Bill Clinton, the president of the United States, turned on the lights with the hope-filled words, "Blessed are the peacemakers." And now I would like to welcome Mary Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Mary Bruce, and I am going to read from my memories of the 1960s when I was a country girl moving to Dublin, finding a job and living in a flat. We were often referred to as the Culshies. There was no decade for me more fun, adventurous, and daring than the 1960s. I grew up in a large family of 8 children on a dairy farm in County Kildare. I was the 3rd eldest in the family and considered a contrary child. My mother ruled her family firmly. She was greatly influenced by the Catholic Church, and we all called her Mummy. This was a hell and damnation church. Everything was a sin, including our thoughts, and for me, very scary. We said the rosary every night on our knees on the kitchen floor. My father was a wonderful, kind, and respected man in our neighborhood. When I was a young child, he patiently listened to all my grievances without comment as he slowly milked his way through our herd of Frisian dairy cows. I had him all to myself, and we formed a bond that lasted until he died. After finishing school, I came to Dublin in the early 60s to find a flat and a job. At that time, Dublin was a faded city in need of a new era. Ireland struggled through the 50s, poor and oppressed, a young country with an old heart. It was a country of unemployment, immigration, and ruled by the church. Then along came 1960 with talk of free love, wild concerts, protests, and hippies, and a new era emerged. Books like The Country Girl by Edna O'Brien, then the Beatles liberated us with their music and fashion. Short skirts, back combing, stiletto heels, and daring do. And I was there in the thick of all this excitement. My qualifications for work included my leaving cert and 1 year secretarial college. I was set on a path to office work, which I hated, and on reflection didn't suit me at all. I had no ambitions and never thought to question the decisions made for me at the time. My kind father brought me a beautiful new winter coat with a lynx collar and gave me seed money to get me started in a flat. I found a job working for a printer's down the quays, and I can't remember how I wrangled my way into a flat in Dartmouth Square. By the standards of the day, I was old, almost 19. I was an innocent, straight from convent boarding school, with no experience of life and very little real confidence. However, I was more than ready to escape, join in the excitement, get my own place, and start living my own life. I was sharing the flat with 5 girls from Tipperary. Joan Fogarty and I shared a double bed. Joan worked for Goff's bloodstock sales, and she had some interesting and well-known horsey connections. It was through her that I went to the races most Saturdays. Beg, borrow, or steal, we dressed up to the nines, smart suits, leather bags, and gloves. We were thrilled when our photographs were in the evening paper several times at the races. But appearances can be deceptive. Thinking back to those times now, we lived in Dickensian squalor. 1 shared bathroom for the whole house, 3 flats. No heat, a 3-bar electric fire, and coal fires when we could afford to order a bag of coal, which was dumped into a tea chest on the landing. The black dust penetrated everything. A 2-burner electric cooker. Cooking was limited to sausage, beans, and eggs. Sardines and toast was another regular on our menu. Of course, good brown bread was cheap and filling and readily available. Usually around payday, alternate weeks, we would splurge and have some friends in for tea. Mary Lonergan would pick up the Hafner sausages and bacon down in Henry Street, and I would buy a gorgeous cake from Tea Time Express in Dawson Street. We felt very indulgent and yearned to be sophisticated. Our clothes needed constant washing and cleaning. Dublin was a dirty city in those days. While dry cleaning was cheap, we reserved it for our best blouses and skirts. The rest of our laundry was hung on the line outside, hoping for a good drying day. Strange how these little privations bothered me at the time. We were high on life and dreams. Chief among them was to find the perfect husband. I do remember we moved flats often from Dartmouth Square, Morehampton Road, Pembroke Road. We also changed jobs, trying to get closer to where we lived or more money. I eventually worked for Herman Good, the famous Jewish lawyer on Dawson Street, who later went on to be a Supreme Court judge. At the time I was working for Herman Good, he represented Sean Mahangi, the sensational and gory murder case in Dublin in 1963. These jobs paid pittance, and changing jobs had nothing to do with ambition or moving up the ladder. There were very few ladders for women to climb in those days. On reflection, our ambition was to meet the man of our dreams and be swept away and saved from all our current woes. We certainly tried very hard. We went to all the university dances and the rugby clubs on Saturday night, and at every dance there were at least 10 women to every man. Think of the movie Brooklyn. They got the scene right. Men on one side and women on the other. The really pretty girls were asked up to dance first and so on, and the wallflowers, off to myself, had to beat a hasty retreat to the ladies' room. We didn't feel rejected, it was just how it was, and we knew we would have to come out when the music stopped and stand by the wall again and again. These dances were weekly events, and off we went every week, full of hope that this dance would be different, another week, another dance. When all else failed, we prayed for the ideal husband. Word was that the weekly novena to St. Valentine's really worked. We trudged down to Whitefriars Street to light candles at a shrine, all in the earnest hope of finding this good husband. Despite no ideal man on the scene, my memories were of all the fun we had. In the summer, we hitched all over Ireland to flaws and festivals, and God knows where we stayed. I do recall a weekend in Achill. I was walking back from a dance in the pitch black and howling rain when I fell into a ditch with muck up to my neck. Misery like that was memorable. I remember the joy and hysteria when President John Kennedy came to Dublin. I climbed up on a railing around Trinity College and cheered as his car drove by. He referred to his Irish visit as the best 4 days of his life. We all loved him and we were so proud he was Irish. We did have odd dates and I had a boyfriend now and then. However, the dread of being left on the shelf was ever present. We went to the pictures, but money was so tight, and any little we had, we spent on clothes, rent, hairdressers, taxis, dances, 10 cigarettes a week, and the little pittance in our pockets was for food. I was stick thin in those days. When I went home for the odd weekend, I came back loaded down with as much food as I could carry, including eggs, butter, mommy's brown bread, tea, etc. Foreign holidays became the rage, and I saved to go to Spain for the first time on a package tour to Tossa del Mar. I lived like this for about 4 years, and then I became restless with the limitations of my life. The freedom of flat life waned. Being splashed by muddy buses in the rain while wearing stiletto heels was sheer misery. We were just scraping by with little money and long office hours, and I couldn't see much future for myself. I wanted more out of life, and I always had wanderlust and a deep longing to travel and see the world. I got a job in the old Sheeling pub in Ranelagh. It was the early days of the Chieftains, who played there 3 nights a week for a small cover charge. I took the admission charges and started to save for my escape. I tried to go to the States because my dream was to live in San Francisco, but the process of emigration would take 6 months. Canada, on the other hand, was accepting people within a month, and I knew a few people here in Vancouver, so I made my choice. Coming of age is such a pivotal time in one's life. It was another era and another time, and a far cry from the present day. I often feel I was born into the 19th century and hurled into the 21st century. The lovely innocence of youth, combined with the sheer courage of making one's way into a new and changing world, made it ideal training ground for the remainder of my life, and I treasure those memories. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, performers. Thank you, performers, for those wonderful personal readings. It's always so interesting how fathers and travel appear frequently in our stories. And now I would like to invite Maura de Freitas back, our Bridget Festival Director, to formally close our 2022 festival. Maura.
Thank you, Aideen. Hello, everyone. It's been a wonderful festival, and I want to thank all our panelists and participants who worked to put together such great presentations. Each session offered a unique insight into the work and lives of women, both in Ireland and in Canada. From our opening event, Bridget, a return to the divine feminine, the message has been the strength, creativity, and healing light of women. Deirdre Cohan is the talented Irish-Canadian artist who presented the Bridget cross weaving session. That session was a lot of fun with great audience participation. And it was great to see all the completed crosses held up at the end. Another highlight was the Bad Bridget presentation, and ironically, later on that same day, the Bridget Call story, another strong rebel woman, was presented by her partner, Chris Morrissey and Dr. Morris Casey. I think you will agree that we presented a number of landmark sessions, particularly Records and Redress, a dialogue on Irish mother and baby institutions and Canadian residential schools. I want to thank all the participants who worked so hard to put this important discussion together. Finally, it was such a pleasure to present again with performance reading Women of the Diaspora. I would like to extend a special thank you to Professor Dara Culhane with Simon Fraser University for all her work in facilitating this event. You can read more about all the panelists who participated in this year's events on our website, bridgetfestivalvancouver.com. Our amazing tech team features Mary McSweeney, Aideen Cleary, and Catherine McCooey. And it is a real privilege to work with these dedicated women. They are the angels who work their magic behind the scenes to bring the Bridget Festival of Vancouver to you, our audience. We invite everyone to complete our post-event survey and have your name entered for a chance to win a 5x7 limited edition print of this magnificent painting of Bridget, signed by the artist, Deirdre Cohan. It will be fully matted and ready for framing. We will be sending out a link to this survey along with our newsletter to everyone who registered for Bridget Festival Vancouver. I would like to thank Frank Flood and all the team at the Consulate General of Ireland, Vancouver. We could not present Bridget Festival Vancouver without their support. We also want to thank our local sponsors, the IRL Group, Transcold Distribution, and the Wolf and Hound. Finally, a reminder, the Bridget Festival of Vancouver is presented by the Irish Benevolent Society of BC, which was established in 1994 to provide emergency assistance to the Irish community. If you would like to help support that ongoing work, you will find a link to the Bridget Festival Vancouver website to donate. Watch our website for recordings of this year's sessions, which will be posted on YouTube later this week. And we hope to see you all again in 2023. I would like to remind you that the next big community event upcoming will be the annual Celtic Fest next month. Watch for updates in Irish in BC for news of that event. And now we will close with a short video produced by Ireland's Department of Foreign Affairs, especially for Bridget's Day 2022. Thank you.
I'm Kathleen again from Ashbourne in County Meath, and we're here at St. Bridget's Well in Kildare town. There's a well-known tune and a dance called St. Patrick's Day, and it's known all around the world. But in my research here, we realised that there actually isn't a tune or a dance dedicated to St. Bridget's Day. And legend has it that Bridget asked the King of Leinster for some land to build her monastery. He refused initially, but when she went back, she asked him, "Will you give me the lands that my cloak will cover?" And he said he would. So each of her four sisters grabbed a corner of the cloak and they walked in opposite directions, north, south, east and west, and the cloak grew and spread and stretched, and she built her monastery here in Kildare, not far from where I am today. So the tune I wrote is a slip jig, and it has four parts to represent the St. Bridget's cross and the four directions of her cloak spreading far and wide.